Hey guys, today I'm doing a little fishing by the house in the John boat, and I thought I'd make a video on something I like to do, and that is skipping a jig. Help get your jig in places that are hard to reach, places that people are not putting their baits, help you catch more fish and catch some bigger fish. I'll go over the jigs I use, the trailers, how they can help you get started in all this. I'll go over the most important aspect of it, which is your rod and reel setup. I'll go over the actual technique itself and some other little tips and tricks along the way to help prevent backlashing and to help minimize the frustration of learning this technique. It's really good technique. Really comes in handy in places like the Ozarks with a lot of docks, or if you're fishing somewhere that's got a lot of overhanging brush and you want to get your bait further back in there. This is a really good technique, something you can learn and help put a lot more fish in the boat. All right, so I'll start off talking about the rod. So this is a 7-foot heavy fast action rod. A few things you need to take into consideration with your rod when you're setting up to skip a jig, and that is your length, your power of your rod, so heavy, medium, heavy, and then the action of your rod. So start off with length. That's pretty self-explanatory. I prefer 7 foot. If you are a little bit shorter, I'm 5'11". If you're shorter, maybe a 6'8" or 6'9" wouldn't be a bad spot to start. If you're taller, you can probably get away with a 7'3" if you want, but I think a 7-footer is a good sweet spot to start with, and it works for most people. So the next thing I'll talk about is just the power of your rod. So this is a heavy, it's a Dobbin, so it's rated for 1/4 to 1 ounce. Dobbins, I think, are a little bit lighter on the power of the rod. This is a heavy, and I would consider this to be comparable to like a medium heavy for a St. Croix. So it kind of depends what brand you use. There's a lot of good rod manufacturers out there, and you kind of got to know how heavy the action of the rod is, or the power of the rod is. Like I said, this is rated for 1/4 to 1 ounce, and I really feel like I could probably throw a 1/4 ounce bait on here and still have decent accuracy. It's not like a broomstick type rod. It doesn't feel too heavy of a power. You do not want something that's too heavy of a power. You're not going to have good control of the lighter baits, and you're going to have negative accuracy. Now, the most important aspect of your rod is the action itself. So this is a fast action. You want either a fast or an extra fast action. What I mean by that is if you take your rod, I'll try and show this the best I can. If you take your rod 7-foot blank and you grab your line towards the end and you pull down like this, you can see how just the end of this rod loads up. I would say 80% of the rod is mostly backbone. The last 20% of this is your tip, is what loads up when you cast. A fast, or an extra fast action, I should say, I would consider more like a 90-10 or even a 85-15, which would mean like the last 10% of your rod is going to load up and the rest of it's going to be your backbone. Now, if you're trying skipping with a moderate action rod, say it comes down here, maybe it's a 60-40 or 70-30, you can still skip with that. You can load up your rod, but the issue you're going to have is accuracy. When your rod loads much further down in here, think of the end as a lot more room to kind of sling around back and forth, kind of like a wet noodle. You're not going to have the accuracy that you need. Trying to get your bait into tight quarters in between docks or things like that. It's going to affect your accuracy, and it's going to make it more frustrating. So I would highly recommend either a fast or an extra fast action on your rod. All right, now as far as your reel goes, you can pretty much use whatever brand you want. There's a lot of good brands out there. I prefer Daiwa. I like the Tatulas. I've been using them for years, so that's what I like to use. Basically, the biggest thing you're going to look for is you want some sort of external cast control. Most reels have it. You can get an older reel that doesn't, where you have to take the side plate off. But for skipping and stuff, the ease of use is definitely worth it. You want something you can adjust on the fly as conditions change, or you use different lures. You don't have to take your side plate off and mess with it. So the first thing we're going to focus on here is your tension knob. All this is you can screw this on or off, and that's going to apply pressure to the end of your shaft of your spool. So if you back this off all the way and you click your button, release it, and let it go, this is going to fall very fast, and it's going to just keep spooling. There's going to be nothing stopping it from spooling. And you'll see a lot of people that they'll tell you to reel your bait up, towards the end of your line, hold it up at like a 45-degree angle, hit the button, let it fall, and you're either going to get some overrun or you're going to get no overrun. They're going to tell you, you're going to hear different people say, oh, you want it to overrun just a little bit. And some people say you don't want it to overrun at all. And that's fine, you can go with that, but I honestly think there's a little bit better way to get it dialed in for me. So get your bait on the ground or something so there's no pressure on your line. And then take your spool, and you should be able to just put your finger on it and barely rock it left and right. So you can just barely feel a little bit of play going left and right. And that is going to be the sweet spot. You should not have to adjust it beyond that. So just fine tune this, tighten it a little bit, loosen a little bit. You just barely want to be able to, feel that has a little bit of movement in it. That's all you need to do. So if you have that too tight, where you drop your bait and you're not getting any backlash, or your bait's not falling, you're just going to be fighting yourself. You're not going to get very much distance, and it's going to hamper you on your skipping ability. So the next thing we're going to look at is your external cast control. So this is basically just a magnet. When you turn this dial, it rotates the magnet of how much is going to be affecting the spool. Now the Tatula here has range of 0 through 20. 0 is no magnet, 20 is all the way up. I would start, when you're beginning and learning how to skip, start with it on 20 or 18, at least 3/4 of the way turned up to start with, for sure. Now when I start skipping, like right now, this is on 8 or 9, so that's about the range I keep mine usually when I start to skip. Sometimes go down to like 5 or 6, but it's usually around 8 is a good number to keep it at. So this is basically going to keep you from having just a horrible backlash. It's going to keep the reel from being totally loose. But as you get better, you can dial this down and get lower and lower, and you'll get more distance out of it. But if you have a bad cast, you're going to pay a little bit of the consequences there, and you're going to have more of a backlash. As far as line goes, this is just Seagar fluorocarbon. I think it's 17 pound. It might be 20, I can't remember. But it's nothing fancy. You don't have to get crazy with it. You can use braid, you can use mono, whatever you want to use, whatever you like to use on your jig rod will work. I prefer fluorocarbon over braid though, just because I think braid tends to get kind of hung up on itself sometimes. A little tip when you're learning is, say you're fishing around boat docks in 10 foot of water. You know you're not going to be skipping any more than 15 or 20 feet plus the depth of the water. So say 60 feet of line is plenty. You're not going to use any more than 60 feet of line on any given skip. So I would go down to 60 or 70 feet of line in your spool, take it off, and put some electrical tape across it, and then reel back over it. So now when you're skipping, say you have a bad cast or something, and your reel wants to backlash, you're only going to backlash down to that tape. It's not going to overspool beyond that. So that's just a little tip to help keep you from having to constantly pull backlashes out all the way to like the bottom of your reel. And another thing is how much line you keep on your reel when you're doing this. I generally keep it a little more than halfway, probably between half and 3/4. I generally do not fill it up all the way when I'm skipping. It seems like it wants to overrun a lot easier, so I keep it on a little bit of the lower side. I'm going to go over the actual technique here. So basically you're going to start with about 6 or 8 inches of line at the end of your rod, and then you're going to come through, keep it parallel, and then as you get further out and your bait starts to skip a little, you're going to lift your rod tip up. When you lift your rod tip up, that's basically going to allow it to glide out a little bit further. And another thing here is just start in open water. Don't focus on a target when you're trying to learn the technique. Just try and get the basics down, and then you can focus on targets and getting it underneath things like that. But you do not need to put a ton of effort into this. It's almost like a gentle roll cast, sidearm type thing, and then the bait will kind of skip itself from there. So basically you just let the rod do the work. So I'll give you a little example here. So you just follow through, leave your rod tip parallel to the water, and then as it gets further out, you're going to lift your rod tip up. You're basically just going to let your rod do the work. It's similar to like a golf swing or a baseball swing. If you cast, if you follow through and lift up your rod, you'll get a lot more distance. And you can take your other hand and place it just on above the rod, and that will really help kind of speed up the tip of your rod without much effort. Once again, you'll just come through, keep your rod tip same level, against the level of the water, and then slowly raise it up as your bait gets further. So just another example. That one hit a little further out. It didn't skip quite as easy, and those are things that you can change. And you're definitely not going to have perfect skips all the time. Doesn't matter really how much you do it. There's quite a few variables here, and you know, it is what it is. You'll get better over time, but you also learn that you can adjust, you know, where your bait hits in relation to your target. But like I said, right now all you're focusing on is getting the skips to work. So we'll go just one more time here. Something else I want to talk about is more of an underhand type skip, almost like a pitch. So what you need to do is get your bait just above the height of your reel, and you're going to grab your bait down a little bit, load up the tip of your rod, kind of like this, and you're going to pitch it out all in one motion. So let's see if I can get this off the side of the boat and get this back camera to capture it, but if not, I'll get my chest mount to capture it a little bit better. So I'll start here. You just kind of pitch it out, and the bait will glide across the top of the water. And this is really useful at places like Lake the Ozarks when you get between docks and things like that. You don't have room to sidearm all the time. You don't always have room for that perfect setup. So I'll go up here off the side. You can kind of get it to glide, and that's a little bit further out. Sometimes, you know, you're a lot closer to a dock and you can't start to skip that far out. So you kind of got to do that, and that's kind of a poor example of it. But like I said, you're not going to have perfect skips. Let's be honest here. I'm not. That's kind of the underhand type skip and pitch. So you can be versatile with that and your regular skip. You pretty much have most of the bases covered. Next thing I need to talk about are the jigs themselves and then the trailers. So this is a brush puppy jig from Lure Parts Online. It's pretty much what I throw a lot of the time for my pitching jig. That's where I get most of my jigs from, and I just tie them myself. But you have this style head where you can see it's very curved. It's pretty forgiving, because you're basically looking at this bottom plane here. Depending what trailer you use, that's what the bait's primarily going to be gliding on. But when you have a little bit of a curved head like this gives you a lot of forgiveness. Say this is the water, say you skip and your bait's actually hitting like this a little bit, it's actually going to plane it down and out and smooth it out in order to get a better skip. So that's an example of one of the jigs that I primarily throw. And here's another style. These used to be really popular, and I'm sure a lot of people still use these, but this is a arky style, and these skip phenomenally as well. So same thing, you look at this head, very forgiving, and you see how flat this portion is, especially depending what trailer you put on there. And this right here, it will glide across the water very easily. So you have a lot of room for forgiveness. Again, if you have a too much of a downward angle, you know, it's going to kind of plane itself out and still have a decent skip. So that's basically what I'm using. And as far as sizes go, I find myself throwing 1/2 ounce a lot. But if you're having trouble and your jig's digging in the water, you're not getting as much distance as you want, you have your reel kind of dialed back, you're digging the jig in the water too much. You know, you need to work either on your angle or keeping your rod up as it's getting further away from you. But something that will also help is downsize to a 3/8 ounce jig. A lot of times that can help you get more distance. You might be surprised just changing that up. Here are some examples of the crawl trailers I normally throw. This is a Rage Crawl, and when I'm throwing this on a jig, if you cut right here at the segments, it is now the same size as a Rage Tail, which is what they sell as a crawdad trailer, like a jig trailer. So I buy the craws, and then I can flip these baits as a whole if I want, or if I want to throw them on a jig, I just snip them off and I'm good to go. These are excellent for skipping. This is a net bait pack-a-chunk, also very good trailer. This trailer does not skip quite as easily just because the length of this body is a little bit narrower and it's not quite as long as the Rage Tail. But I will say that this is an excellent trailer for smaller jigs, like a 3/8 ounce jig, or even this Arky, which is quite a bit more compact in length than my brush puppy style jig. So you can see kind of the size difference here. The Arky is quite a bit smaller, but this is an excellent trailer to skip with. basically the only other trailer style that I'm going to use for skipping is a beaver style bait, and I will trim these down. This is a missile D-bomb. You can use a Zoom Z-crawl. There's tons of other beaver style baits. Use whatever you want, but these are also great because look at this big flat surface here that this bait can skip on. It's awesome. Now sometimes they have these extra appendages like these here. You might want to trim those off depending on if you want more distance, things like that, or what kind of profile you're looking for. But that's something to always keep in mind. And I would say that this probably skips a little bit better than even the Rage Tail, but I really like throwing the Rage Tails a lot. So basically that's what you're looking for, is a nice flat surface like this. Give something for your bait to glide on, and you'll have good success skipping your jigs. Here's another little area. It's just little overhanging branches, and these are all just small examples of what I have on this little lake I'm fishing. You know, it's not quite as good as Lake the Ozarks or something, but been a little busy, don't have time to get up there right now, so I figured this will do. But you could just get your bait up in there a little bit, keep your distance. You know, you could get close and flip your bait up in there, but if you kind of stay back, keep your boat further away, keep your trolling motor away, you'll be better off. I'll cast back in there again just to show an example. Oh, there he is. Little guy. They're pretty much all little in this lake. I've been trying to, got off. Been trying to clean them out. So times like these where the water is super calm, good time to practice. There's another one. You're gonna have to set the hook on him. So coming up here is a prime example of an area to skip. Obviously this would be better when the sun's higher, you know, during the midday when you're looking for the dark shade and stuff like that on the docks. But this is just a good example of an area. So you just reel back and you put it in there and you get your bait a lot further back than most people would. You know, if they're flipping the dock, they got to get a lot closer to it. Get trolling motor noise, stuff like that. Scares the fish away, blows the area out. Or if you can stay back and skip your bait in there, you'll be a lot more successful, a little more stealthy. Something else too is your boat positioning is very critical. If you can, obviously, get your sidearm cast in there, you'll be a lot better off. But if not, and you do have to get closer, or you don't have enough room, there's two docks, you know, side by side, and you're kind of in between them, something like the Ozarks, and you got to do your underhand pitch. That's better than nothing. Hopefully that helps you with skipping some boat docks and stuff like that, and getting the technique down. Once you get done skipping jigs, you can move on to frogs. You can skip buzz baits if you put like a toad or a plastic on there. Believe it or not, you can skip a spinnerbait if you really try, but that's pretty hard. But I mostly stick with just skipping jigs. It's something I like to do, and I've always liked to do it. I like fishing jigs, and it's just another way to get a jig in a spot that other people do not get it. Just remember, get the right rod set up, get your reel set up, pick the right bait with the right trailer, and then just practice. Don't get frustrated. Put a little tape on your reel so you don't backlash your entire reel until you get a little bit better. And then all I can tell you is just keep on practicing. It does take time. You're gonna probably get a little frustrated through the process, and if you do, just stop. Don't skip for hours and hours and get frustrated because it's not going your way. Do it for 20 minutes, and then if it's not going your way, just stop and go fish, and then return to it later. So hopefully it helps you, and we'll have some more videos coming up. Ryan and I are going to be going to the St. Lawrence River, try and get to Lake the Ozarks 1 or 2 more times before then. That's in mid-June, but just been really busy with work. We all have been, so it's been hard to get away and get some videos filmed. So trying to keep it up for you guys and get some new content, but you know, the best I can do right now is just after work. So appreciate it, and then thanks for watching, guys.